Welcome to Southside Westeros, where we explore the world of Game of Thrones. From the fist of the first man to the catacombs of the Red Keep, no secrets will be safe from us. Enter and forever be changed.
There is only one God, and his name is death. And there is only one thing we say to death. Not today.
Hello and welcome back to Southside Westeros. I'm D. Paul, your master of whispers, and today is part 2 of our series Best of the Worst, and it's none other than the Boltons, Roose and Ramsey. Now, I do a lot of digging in the back rooms of Reddit because I feel many of those theories, while wild and crazy, some of them show the undertones of people's feelings about the show. And even though everyone tries to be different, if you take a step back, you notice a common theme. And the common theme is what your average fan felt. And they felt that Ramsey, if not the worst, was one of the worst. And the only one who edges him out is, of course, Joffrey or Cersei. However, Roose is given a pass universally. And I do believe that because Ramsey was put in the forefront and he, at his hands, I should say, were some of the worst atrocities on camera. However, what I feel everyone misses is what created Ramsey. Did Ramsey just come out this way? Was he the sadistic, nightmarish, devilish individual from the womb? Was he this way because he was a bastard? The last name of Snow brings shame in the world of Westeros. Was that shame what impacted him and turned him into the creature that abused Sansa and horrifically mutilated Theon Greyjoy? Now, I know I normally give you a disclaimer, but if you're here, you're one of us. You're part of the tribe, so we're going to keep on going. We never look at that. We never look at the creation of the monster. We only look at the results and the destruction of said monster. But this monster came from somewhere, and we were given all those facts. We just didn't realize it. Some of you did. And knowing how smart you are for being here in this podcast, then I would jump out and say you knew it too. And that is Roose Bolton, the Lord of the Dreadfort and the head of House Bolton. Now, he was the former ruling figurehead of the great House of the North after usurping the position of House Stark. But that's jumping ahead. I always got to wet your whistle. But I'm going to start with, and forgive me if I'm a little stuffy, here in the Northeast, we have a pretty big pollen spray going on. So you may be hearing the results of said spray. I may even have to clear my throat. I will try not to. But again, forgive me. The information will be worth a little bit of nasally delivery. But we're going to start with a quote by Roose Bolton. In my family, we say, a naked man has few secrets. A filleted man has none. Now, Roose, forgive me, is referring to the sigil of his house. And on their flag, it shows a man being filleted. Filleted means to take a knife, sometimes sharp, sometimes not, and peel back the man's skin until he gives you every secret in his being. This is the sigil, my friend. The sigil of his house. This is what makes up and comprises his being. His moral compass began with the understanding that we have to flay human beings. This is Lord Roose Bolton. This is who created the circumstances that brought us Ramsey. And you may have had this conscious thought, but did you really focus on how horrid Roose was? I don't think you could, because he made it look so effortless. Ramsey, for all his evil, I always felt that he was trying to impress Roose. And you may have felt the same, but to the point where he may not have enjoyed everything he did. The fire or the anger that caused him or allowed him to do those unspeakable acts, in some regard is what I'm saying, I felt was his need for legitimization, to be accepted by this figurehead who he clearly idolized. Now, to idolize this man would be to idolize everything he's done to not only keep his position, but also instill fear in all those he governs. Now, after Ramsey does what he does here is when he fully realizes his horns and his devilish behavior. But leading up to it, I give it all to Roose. Roose is the guy that does this. But we'll give you a little background on him like I always do. We'll focus on the kind of the moves that he made. I think he was always playing the game in the background. And what would eventually betray him is his viciousness, is his need to always manipulate and torture. You see this. It just looks effortless. Now, Roose was the head of House Bolton, as I said, a vassal family to House Stark of Winterfell. A vassal. He was the lord of the Dreadfort, and Roose takes pride in his house sigil, the flayed man. Now, although torture is outlawed in the North by Ned Stark, his family is famous for filleting the skin of their enemies as a means of torture and execution. Now, Roose fought for Eddard Stark in the Civil War against House Targaryen, known as Robert's Rebellion. He picked his side, and he proved his worth as a soldier in the Battle of the Trident. He was one of the heroes. He advised Robert to execute Barristan Selmy, one of my favorite characters in the legendary Kingsguard, sworn to the Targaryens, but Robert overruled Roose and pardoned Selmy. Now, that paragraph there is chock full of information. So, what that tells you, one, Roose is a very powerful ally to the Starks and to the North. Roose, while his practices are frowned upon and outlawed, they're tolerated when it benefits the North, and any war where Roose is called upon for his banner. He backed up Ned Stark in the war for the House Targaryen and for the Iron Throne. And he was an integral part in them winning this, which brought him a certain amount of turn my head the other way while you do what you do because you did help us. But they didn't respect his counsel. And this is a common theme throughout the show. People do not respect his counsel. Common theme. Because just because you're vicious and effective does not mean you're wise. How can wisdom come from chaos and destruction? But some of his counsel should have been heeded. Or shouldn't it? I don't know. We'll get into it. Now, I find it interesting that he raped Ramsey's mother and hung her husband for not obtaining his permission to marry. We've seen this in Braveheart and other things. But he raped her because they didn't get permission. This is one of those things that Ned turned his blind eye to. For all intents and purposes, the North is full of savages, and savages have needs, and you have to allow them to fulfill those needs, and it's better to allow them to fulfill them on the peasants than on other lords. This is that part that we don't see when these songs are sung of the merriment. It's the pure evil that needs to be done to hold power. Because power is fear, and fear is power. And those that instill fear the best will always be in power, i.e. Roose Bolton. Now, in Season 1, House Bolton banners are present among Robb Stark's forces in Winterfell. They march south to fight the Lannisters. Following the imprisonment of Ned Stark, Robb is proclaimed the King of the North by his other bannermen, following the death of Ned. But Roose is never present. No Boltons are present, other than the setup of their prominent house. So they're a house to be respected, even though you don't see any representatives of them. It gives you an idea. This is a pretty big house. I tell you, go into the book. The book goes into very good detail on the size of the house and their prominence. But we don't really see Roose until Season 2. And he fights for Robb and in the victory at Oxcross. The following morning, he reports that they killed several Lannister men. Actually, 5 for every 1 casualty they suffered. And this is pride to Roose. This is winning. We're winning here. More of them are dead than us. This is war. This is what it is. However, he does express concern over the volume of prisoners that they have taken. He's saying that they're struggling to even feed their own men. Again, you're coming from the North, which is feeling the effects of winter way before the South. You're forcing men who have already overworked themselves to harvest their grain and their crops and get themselves ready for this long winter. Remember, winter's lasted years in Westeros. And now you want to take prisoners of our enemies and feed them when we're struggling to keep them strong enough to not only fight and kill 5 men for every 1 man that went down from us, but also make the journey down south where they're fed very well and waiting for us. Now, when I put it that way, it sounds reasonable. But the way he put it was less explaining and just more honesty. We can't feed these people and feed our own men. But he does it with respect, which shows that for all his savagery, Roose is a diplomat. He understands how to speak with authority, respect, but also just underneath those who are above him. Robb insists that the prisoners be treated well and rejects Roose's suggestion that they torture the officers, reminding him that the Boltons' practice of filleting their enemies is outlawed in the North. Now, this is when Roose warns Robb that the high road is pretty but difficult. Robb counters that he is treating his prisoners well in hopes that the Lannisters will treat his sisters well. We got to back up here. We got to back up. Roose gave him the best advice he could give them. Robb turned it down because while Robb may know how to fight, while Robb may have Ned Stark's battle acumen, Robb also has Ned Stark's diplomatic abilities, which are less than zero. Robb does not understand war, just like his father really didn't understand war. Your sisters are not why they're fighting. Your sisters are women in a feudalistic society that does not value women, regardless of who their last name belongs to. They don't value them. This is not why these men are following you, Robb. They're following you to overturn the Lannisters, take their money, split it up amongst the people, put you in power, and hopefully gain something from it. This is what people follow you for. They're not following you because you call them. They're not following you because of some legend and some song. They're following you because we're getting something out of this. At the very least, the North will be our own kingdom. I won't have to pay taxes to the king. I won't have to send you a piece of my crop. And what we find, we keeps, in the words of Bart Simpson. Yep. But he didn't understand that. And here's the other thing Robb didn't understand, the other part of diplomacy. When he makes the suggestion to Roose, not really suggestion, but when he tells them that it was outlawed, he was unaware of the head turning. Ned may have outlawed it publicly, but if Ned needed to know something, Roose, tear that mofo's skin off now. So this is where Robb has a lack of real understanding. He just wants to fight. He's a fool like his father. And we'll discuss this in Robb's podcast, The House of Stark, later on. But I'm just showing you where Roose's acumen at diplomacy is disrespected. And in a way, he has no choice. I mean, this guy should be respected more than he is. Even though he's a savage, he should be respected more than he is. And with each slight, going back to Ned Stark and Robert Slight, he becomes more and more unhinged in his behavior and his allegiances. But being the man he is, he always has to give you that air of control and emotionless decision-making. That's what Ramsey didn't get from his father, that ability to control the emotions, because that made for more effective torture. Now we see the silent sister, Talisa, who would eventually be Robb's wife, treating a wounded Lannister soldier. Again, Roose would rather kill him than waste the time. We have soldiers that need to be helped. He criticized the spending time on these soldiers. Why are we helping them? We have limited resources. We should be getting our forces ready for the next round. We're fighting a numerically superior army. Why are we helping their numbers? It was madness. It was idiotic, and they didn't understand what they came for. He brings Robb and Cat news of Winterfell's fall. shortly after that, at the hands of the turncoat Theon Greyjoy. He reports that there's no news of Robb's brothers, but that Sir Roderick has been killed. And enraged Robb, he just enraged, almost to a tantrum, declares that he must return to the north to retake his castle to save his brothers. But Roose counters, again giving solid counsel, that they have the Lannisters on retreat. Again, we have the bigger army running from us, and we got to continue going at them. We can go get Winterfell later. Whatever's going on doesn't matter. We're not fighting for your little brothers, Robb. We're fighting for you and your father. Come on. Your father's legacy is what we're fighting for. No, we're fighting to free the North. And going back is not going to free the North. It's just going to put us in a strategically weak position where the Lannisters can crush us whenever they want. No, we're not doing that. He tells the king that he can have his bastard, Ramsay Snow, muster a few hundred men, which is interesting. I think everyone watching the show missed that. How, Roose, when you were supposed to have your bannermen down here fighting with us because we have a numerically superior opponent, how are you able just to grab a couple hundred men? Because you were holding them back in case this whole thing falls apart. Roose is very intelligent, people. Very, very intelligent. Robb insists that Theon must be brought to him alive. Again, weak. Weak. It's not about your honor and you killing him. It's about him being dead. You can be smart or you can be alive. Which one do you want to be? Roose was pragmatic. He was straight to the point. But he gives Robb what he wants. Yeah, sure. And then Robb makes another. You see, Robb and the Starks show their weakness to their enemies and their allies, causing them to become enemies. Any Ironborn who give up are offered a pardon. They took over your place. What are you really doing here, Robb? Are you a woman? Your mother's already giving you all this bad advice. She's got you looking weak, and now you want to pardon the people that just took over your castle? But I should say, Roose did what he did and set his plan in motion. Because, see, Roose saw what was happening here, and he was covering his bases. He was playing the game. But why he wouldn't be effective, we'll find out later. But after the Battle of Yellow Fork, Robb's bannermen gather to hear Cersei's rejection of peace terms. They're complaining. The prison cells are overflowing. We're spending time taking care of our enemy. Robb, hearing these complaints, leaves camp with a small force to negotiate the surrender of Crag. Cat releases Jaime Lannister during this time, enraging Robb and his bannermen, and it resulted in her actually being put in jail. Now, Roose again meets with Robb to discuss the situation in Winterfell. Robb details his plan to offer mercy to Theon's men so that they will abandon him and allow him to retake the castle with minimal bloodshed. Again, you're telling Roose, the flayed man, this is you got to know who your back is. You got to know who your gangsters are. You got to feed them. You got to let them eat. Roose is confident that this will work, and the discussion is interrupted again by Queen Talisa, and Roose leaves him. Now, we don't see him again until season 3. And Roose, along with the rest of the northern hosts, arrive at Harrenhal. They find this, castle in ruins, of course, and abandoned, and the captives slain. And they find the maester there, though, Qyburn. Robb and Talisa attend to the man's injuries, and Roose discusses Jaime Lannister's escape with Rickard Karstark. Now, I don't know if you saw this, and assures him that the dead will be avenged. This is where Roose is covering his bases. He sees that Robb is not the King of the North. He will never defeat Tywin Lannister because he doesn't possess the resolve. He doesn't have the stuff, guys. He doesn't have it. The Ravens come to Harrenhal bearing news of Hoster Tully's death and Winterfell's destruction. Roose delivers the messages to Robb, who charges Bolton with holding Harrenhal with a portion of the Northern Army. You gave this man an army while he and the bulk of the forces ride to Riverrun because you've been jerking around all this time and you're about to lose this daggone war. Now, Locke, I couldn't stand him and his stupid goatee, but he will never get a podcast, Locke, because I don't like you. I don't like anything you did. I don't like anything you're related to. I don't like the word you because of you, Locke. Just kidding. Locke played his character very well. Very unlikable to the end. One of the more satisfying deaths in the entire show. But Locke catches Jaime and delivers him to the Lord of Harrenhal. Roose. This is the first time you actually see Roose lose his cool. This entire time he's been cool. This entire time he's been stone-faced, stoic. I love it. But this is the first time you see him lose his shit. And Roose is visibly angered at Jaime's mutilated state. Jaime asks Roose about Cersei, and in a moment of callousness, this is where Roose got his stuff together again. He got, I got a little frazzle, but I get to be me again. He very slowly explains the details of the Battle of the Blackwater in which Stannis Baratheon attacked King's Landing. He just holds it back, and he's on the verge of telling Jaime that Cersei is dead, only to tell him that Tywin arrived at the last minute and fought Stannis off. Jaime's relief sends him to his knees, and Roose laughs. Now, why was Roose upset at what he did? He was upset at what Locke did because Roose had already picked the Lannisters. He'd already picked a side. He already decided that this was a losing proposition. He's going to get out and make a way for him and his. Again, very intelligent man. Now he negotiates with Jaime and Brienne over dinner. Bolton weighs his options, bluntly informing his captives that the furthest course of action would simply be to murder both of them and discreetly dispose of their bodies. Although Jaime attempts to sway Roose by reminding him of the consequences of crossing his father, Roose is, unperturbed at the prospect of having Lord Tywin as an enemy, as the war is keeping him fully occupied. But ultimately, Roose relents because he's made his decision already, agreeing to release Jaime. However, he's going to hold Brienne. And he sends Jaime with a message for his father that he had no part in his hand being chopped off. Now, Roose then asks Jaime to give his regards to Jaime's father right before he leaves. And Jaime says to tell Robb Stark that the Lannisters send their regards. But afterwards, Roose arrives at the twins to attend the wedding of Edmure Tully and Rosalind Frey. However, he has secretly plotted with House Frey to ultimately bring down the Starks, because his decision was made when Robb made those terrible moves. Marrying the common nurse and pissing off the Karstarks. I can't follow. You're a fool. I'm following you to my death. And would you do it? Would you follow someone to your death? No, you wouldn't. Now I know we're supposed to be the Boltons here, but I'm doing a lot to set it up. But I'm showing you the callous and the cold character that Roose is. A lot of deaths, a lot of killing, and a lot of decisions were made. But he still was a very sinister and disgusting man in what he did. And there's no other evidence other than what he did here at the Red Wedding, where he turned on them and killed Robb in the heart. And his last words where the Lannisters send their regards. He watches the massacre after he kills Robb, and the next day he and Walder Frey gloat over the deaths. And the thing is, Roose, when you look at Roose and what Roose's motivation was, he wanted legitimacy. He wanted what Ramsey wanted. He just had a different way. He wanted to be respected. He wanted to be listened to. He wanted you to take his counsel, use it, and then thank him for it. This is what he wanted. This is what this man needed. Now we have to look at this and the things he did just to be legitimized, just like Ramsey. Now I get it that I may have been slightly misleading because we're not going to get into Ramsey in this one. Ramsey needs his own, and he may actually piggyback with Joffrey as to who did you hate the most. I may do that one, but I want to show the Boltons as a family and what created them. He explains to Walder what happened in Winterfell, and that his bastard son has taken it over with those men that he held back. Roose reported, falsely, of course, what's going on with Ironborn and Theon, and Ramsey actually captured Theon and sadistically tortured and disfigured him. But again, Roose decided to betray Robb a long time ago, so him sending Ramsey there was not for Robb. Him sending Ramsey there was to secure Winterfell so he can be what he was looking for, the Warden of the North. And when he saw that Stannis was defeated, there was no need to continue anymore. There's no need to fight. It's done. This thing is over with. Now, again, you don't turn on Robb Stark and think you can just walk in the north freely. The Lannisters haven't sent. They have sent soldiers north, but not enough for you to walk around with your head up. So he is forced to smuggle himself back into his own lands. It's also due to the Ironborn kind of still out there because he didn't really handle that situation. He just locked down Winterfell initially. Now, arriving at the Dreadfort with his new bride, Roose introduces Lady Walder to Ramsey before entering, ordering the latter to bring the Bolton's prize hostage to him. Ramsey brings Reek, and Bolton sees this, and again, it's the same disappointment like he had with Locke. Why are you people so stupid? Why don't you understand the game and the diplomacy of this and what a hostage can do for you? Well, Roose, the reason why is you didn't teach them any of this. You held your secrets to yourself. All you taught them was viciousness. You taught them to torture, to pull the wings off animals, and to constantly manipulate others for your own benefit. And then you admonish them when they don't know the lessons you didn't learn. This is what turned his men against him. Now, he explains that he wanted to trade Theon for Moat Catelyn, and he needed him unharmed. Ramsey stands by his treatment and says Reek can do way more for us than just be traded. We can use him to get in there, and honestly, that's what it does. It's at this point where he also informs Roose that Brandon and Rickon were never killed. He doesn't know where they are, but he feels he's headed towards Castle Black. Roose orders Locke then to hunt down the Stark boys and head towards Castle Black, and we see what he does when he gets up there, and Hodor, the rest of the clan, take care of that. Now, Roose and his army meet Ramsey near Moat Catelyn, where Ramsey presents him with the fortress's flag, and Roose instructs Ramsey to walk with him. They climb the hill. He asks if there's been any word from Locke, who was killed at this point, and Ramsey answers that there's been nothing. Roose dismisses this as unimportant, speculating that the boys are probably dead. At the top of the hill, this is where he points to the north, and he legitimizes Ramsey as Ramsey Bolton. You see a moment here where Ramsey is stripped away. The snow part. The snow is the evil one, the one that wanted to do it better than his father. He's just a little boy. Wants his daddy at this point. But because of everything he's done and become at this point, he can't enjoy that moment. He leads his forces back to Winterfell and moving his base and operations, to the ruined fortresses. Now, in Season 5, Roose holds on to the north, as opposed by the remaining northern lords. So, all your neighbors don't like you because of what you did. You're disgusting. You went against every tradition and rule and law that we had. And a lot of them lost sons and men at the Red Wedding. But he's scolding Ramsey, again, scolding, for needlessly filleting a northern lord, for doing what you taught me along with his wife and brother. You filleted them alive because they wouldn't pay their taxes. I'm doing what you told me. You're here. You're the warden of the north. You taught me to fillet, so I'm going to fillet. And I'm doing it for you and for your taxes. And I'm doing it so these other Stark bannermen who don't like you start to fear you. I'm doing what you want. You see, what's happening here is Roose is now becoming Robb. And as the common theme in all of these situations, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and it blinds you. Roose is now blind to the things that he saw in being a second or third in command, and now Ramsey is now Roose, and Ramsey is the one not being listened to, and his counsel is not being followed because I don't have the script. He reminds Ramsey that the pact was made with Tywin Lannister, who is now dead, meaning that the Lannisters would no longer support them. You're not giving him this information. You're giving him pieces and pieces and pieces and pieces of the information. He tells Ramsey that the best way to strengthen their hold is not by filleting people, but by subsequently enraging their loved ones, but by marrying into good families. And he was arranging. We didn't know this. It wasn't Littlefinger that arranged Sansa. It was Roose arranged Sansa. So he did have vision, and he saw this here. And when Littlefinger and Sansa arrive, Roose greets the Sansa in courtesy and reciprocates it and all that. And despite knowing that he was the one that actually killed Robb, right? But later, while speaking with Baelish, Roose expresses his doubt as to whose side Littlefinger was really on at this point, because he's visibly concerned with reprisals from Cersei should she find out that Sansa's marrying Ramsey. But Baelish assures Roose that the Lannisters have lost a great deal of power in the wake of Tywin's death, and Roose reveals that he has read a letter sent for Baelish from Cersei before handing it to him, and demands to read Baelish's reply to Cersei before he sends it off. Now, if he was smart, again, blinded, he would know that Littlefinger, he should have picked this up. Littlefinger only cares about himself. But while having dinner with Sansa and his family, Roose grows increasingly annoyed with Ramsey. He's looking at this kid and is like, he's just the ultimate embarrassment to him because he is not him. And when he begins to torture Sansa emotionally by having Reek apologize to her for allegedly murdering her brothers and suggesting that Reek give Sansa away at the wedding, Roose turns the tables on Ramsey by revealing that he and Wilder are expecting a son. So Ramsey later confronts Roose about this, and Roose counters that Ramsey disgraced himself over dinner. Now, why did Ramsey disgrace himself? He disgraced himself doing what Roose taught him. And Roose now sees that you're now trying to be a diplomat. Doesn't fit you, father. Doesn't fit you at all. He then regales Ramsey with the tale of how he met his mother, a miller's wife, who got married without paying Roose homage. Roose had the miller hanged and raped his wife beneath his swaying course. So you admonish this child, and you take away his legitimacy because he was torturing people, and you tell him the story how you tortured his mother, even though she fought him the whole time. Roose was later visited by this woman carrying Ramsey and claiming he was his son. Roose reveals to Ramsey that he was very nearly killed when he looked at his mother and him, but stayed himself when he realized by looking into Ramsey's eyes that he was his son after all. See, Roose never stops manipulating. He never stops torturing those around him. He's manipulating and torturing his son. He switched from every single angle. This is what created Ramsey. Could you imagine having a father like this? You have no moral compass. You have no goodness in you because it was stomped and tortured out of you. I love you, but I hate you, but I love you, but I hate you. The worst torture you can do to someone. Ramsey is stunned. Even Ramsey, this is the one moment in the entire series where you actually have empathy for Ramsey. Because his father, at that moment, you realize what he is was created by Roose. Roose then changes the subject to Stannis Baratheon. Instantly, you just tore my heart out, and now we're going to talk about business. Who was garrisoned at Castle Black, but will surely make another attempt for the Iron Throne, for which he will need to take the North from the Boltons. Roose reminds Ramsey that the North is theirs, and they vow to counter the attack on Winterfell. This is crazy. Now, a few nights later, Ramsey officiates Sansa and officiates Sansa and Ramsey's wedding ceremony in the Godswoods. As Stannis' army is approaching Winterfell, Roose discusses how to retaliate with his council. Roose advocates remaining inside the castle to wait out Stannis' siege, since Stannis' army will break before they run out of supplies. Ramsey, however, suggests that his father meet Stannis in open battle to show him how he will deal with southern invaders. He asks Roose for 20 good men as part of a sabotage mission, one that destroys Stannis' supplies, breaks the morale of his army, and causes his sellswords to desert him. Although Stannis is easily defeated by the Bolton army, in the ensuing battle when he reaches Winterfell, it turns out that the victory for them, as Sansa, it's really a victory for them because Sansa escapes Winterfell with Theon, stripping Roose at that point of his most powerful political asset. He's imploding on himself when we get to season 6. Now, Roose congratulates Ramsey for his victory over Stannis and reminds him that they have effectively betrayed the Lannisters by marrying Ramsey to Sansa Stark, who Ramsey allowed to escape. Roose reminds Ramsey that they cannot defend themselves without support from the other northern houses, who will not only do so if they don't have Sansa, whom Ramsey drove away with his abuse. But he was doing what you taught him. You never taught him when to abuse or when not to abuse. You only taught him to abuse. Now, at this point, Ramsey insists that he has men searching for Sansa and Theon, while Roose reminds him that without Sansa, he cannot produce an heir to the north, and subtly warns him that if this comes to be, he will disinherit him in favor of his unborn son with Walder. Wow. Now, Lord Karstark later informs the Boltons that the hunting party Ramsey sent to find Sansa and Theon has been massacred. We know why. We'll talk about that in Brienne's podcast, right? But Roose chastises Ramsey characteristically for his recklessness and is obviously disgusted at Ramsay's suggestion that they attack Castle Black and kill Jon Snow, who may be sheltering them, since the murderer of Ned Stark's final, albeit bastard, son in the Night Watch will serve as the final straw for all the other houses who, despite them, are betraying the Starks. Now, Maester Walken soon arrives to announce that Walder has given birth to a boy. This sends Ramsay off. You see it. He loses it at that point. Roose, once again, always torturing, always manipulating, says to Ramsay that he will always be remembered and treated as his firstborn child. Ramsay thanks him for saying that and then stabs him. Stabs Roose right in the chest. Ironically, same way he stabbed Robb Stark. I love the poetic justice in Game of Thrones. There's a lot of it. You got to see it. Sometimes you miss it because the scene is so good. The exact same way, go back and look at it, the exact same way he stabbed Robb Stark. Ramsay orders Walken to announce that Roose was poisoned by their enemies, and afterwards he allows his stepmother and his newborn baby brother to be eaten by his hounds. Now, after Roose's death, Ramsay becomes the new Lord of Winterfell and the Lord of the Dreadfort, and the Lord Paramount and Warden of the North by his self-appointment. And though the official story of Roose's death was that he was poisoned, few in the North believe it. Umber openly and accurately accuses Ramsay of murdering Roose, despite Ramsay insisting otherwise, due to the North's immense hatred for Roose for his role in the Red Wedding. No one really cares. I mean, you were in the Red Wedding and you stabbed the King of the North. But they won't pledge their banners to Ramsay. Karstark does, only out of revenge for the Starks for executing his father. And Umber, in order to defend the North against the wildlings and Jon Snow, who let them pass the wall because the White Walkers are coming. Jon Snow, Sansa, Brianna, Podrick, Tollett, and Tormund Giantsbane all learn that Roose has died. Coincidentally, from a letter from Ramsay threatening Jon and Sansa. And Sansa lets him know that Ramsay is probably the culprit. So that's the unceremonious end of Roose Bolton. But Roose constantly felt underappreciated. He felt that no one respected him. I think he felt he was just a tool. He was a well-kept secret. He was that CIA hitman that we sent out when we needed something done, but we would never invite him to dinner. And because of that lack of respect, he became unhinged, and he never knew when to turn off the one thing he can do better than anybody else, which is mentally torture you until you die. And he tried with his son, but all he did was create a monster and make him unhinged. And if I had to sum up the Boltons and why they are the best of the worst: unhinged, evil, vengeful, but I just think they will never feel like they matter. They will never feel that they're more than the evil that they purvey. They define themselves by how much they can harm others, and in the most fashionable and fancy way they can think of. And because of that evil, the plague of Ramsay was released upon the world of Westeros. And that's why Ramsay and Roose Bolton will always be the best of the worst. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Southside Westeros. We look forward to you coming back and visiting us again. If you want to email us, you can reach us at southsidewesteros@gmail.com. You can also reach us at Southside Westeros at both Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch. We're SS Westeros at Cup of Coffee and Twitter. If you want to donate to the program to keep getting this great content, please donate to our Patreon or our Cash App. Both are Southside Westeros. Valodoharas. And may the Mother bring 7 blessings to you all.